All right. You are listening to It Came From the Radio. You know, this is Dr. Feldy, Jennifer Lee Feldman. I am here with Clint Sabom. I've been listening to, I must have listened to like 40 minutes at least of different videos on the supernatural and levitation and reincarnation. He wrote a book called Panic Magic. It's available on Amazon. Here's a little summary of that book. This work moves like a hero's journey of a tormented magician. Troy Abraham, living in current times, remains deeply traumatized from childhood sexual abuse, but he has the power to levitate. He performs at larger and larger venues, asking the audience to check in for any strings or wires in order to prove its true levitation. He delivers poignant, mysterious monologues in between levitations, often challenging the elites. He frequently slips into surrealistic visions and undergoes many life-threatening magical battles with dark magicians. He travels to other dimensions and encounters spirit guides. Eventually, his performances draw the attention of nefarious enemies, and intelligence agencies recruit him to gather intel, all of which culminates in him performing a show in front of the Lincoln Memorial, which I used to live pretty close by to. So, wow, there's a lot going on in this book. You kind of have to know something about the supernatural to write this. What triggered you to write this book about all these topics?
Well, I've always been interested in spirituality and not necessarily confined to one religion. And in undergraduate school for my bachelor's, I majored in religious studies, which I absolutely loved. And then later, at age 30, I went to live in a silent monastery with monks and nuns. And that greatly increased my own spiritual power as well as my own peace of mind and my own integration of body, mind, and soul as I understand it. And then a little bit later, after I got out of the monastery, I decided not to become a monk, but I basically did a book called Initiation into Hermetics by Franz Barden that goes step by step through different magical processes. And it's a book that kind of grabs people because they want power through magic, but it ends up kind of being a book that leads to self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency, yes, but self-fulfillment is what I
Mhm.
mean to say. And that really helped with my spirituality. So it's been a lifelong journey with me. Um, that having said, I'm no enlightened master, to be transparent. I'm no, nothing to brag about completely, but I have had a lifelong interest in spirituality. Some of this is based on autobiographical things. I've certainly undergone magical battles. I've certainly
Mhm.
slipped into surrealistic visions. I've certainly astral projected and traveled to other dimensions. I have done all that. And not only does that relate to me after what you read of that summary, thanks for reading it, by the way, because that's a great synopsis. Not only that, I was traumatized in childhood and adulthood as well. So I have a mixture, just like the main character, of trauma and increased spirituality operating at the same time. And it's been a lifelong journey of trying to integrate all of that. That having said, the main character in this book, in a sense, is worse off than I am in real life. He's
Hmm.
more deeply traumatized than I am in real life. And I've also always been good at monologues. In the monologues, in between levitations at his performances are very, very interesting. And it was actually my favorite part of the book to write and I've performed in a lot of theaters giving monologues. I was the senior class president and gave the commencement speech at my high school graduation. So I have a long history of giving monologues. The difference between me and real life is the monologues in this book are very kind of mysterious and have a certain kind of bent to them. So it's entertaining and it's a teaching tool, this book.
Now, you mentioned levitation in this book. You mentioned levitation in different interviews because I've done my research and I listened to some interviews. Now, there's a psychic out there. She lives in DC. I used to live in DC, Lincoln Memorial, and she's predicted many specific things for a handful of people I know that aren't even really connected to each other. And 10 years later, they came true. Uh, I turned 40 around this year. All these things are supposed to happen. So far, they're happening. We'll see by the end of the year. So her name is Dorothy Kadosh, and she I discovered her from a friend who sent me a video of her where she talked about people flying off into the abyss and they can go flying. And in your book, Panic Magic and interviews, you mentioned levitation. So do you think that people can actually levitate and fly in real life?
Absolutely. I cannot, to be honest. Excuse me. I cannot levitate in real life.
Hmm.
That having said, I am absolutely convinced that by my own study and my own research and my own encounter of people, that there are Buddhist monks living as hermits in caves in the Himalayas, as well as Taoist monks living in the Himalayas that live to be about 250 years old and can levitate and
Wow.
can perform these magical abilities.
Hmm. Now back to your book. Is there something or things that you really hope people take away and get from this book? Is there something that you really want to share with the world or society?
Well, certainly, I want them to be entertained first and foremost. I want it to be a good book for people to be hooked. And I kind of leave it hooked at the end of each chapter. The book moves fast, there's a lot of action. So I want them to be entertained first and foremost. But I also kind of want it to be a bit of a beginner's manual to the spiritual journey and, a teaching tool. In fact, my publisher, and this is published by Star Wars Publishing, it's not self published.
Hmm.
And the head of the publishing company wrote the foreword to the book, and he said it was a manual fit for
Hmm.
esoteric living.
Hmm.
And so I'll go with what he said.
Okay. So now you mentioned a lot of things I like to delve into, but magical battles. As far as I know, I might be in the middle of like a good versus evil situation, which I guess I can't get too far into, or I'm going to incriminate some parties. But what is a magical battle? Like, what does that entail?
It entails getting attacked from a distance
Okay.
and getting attacked with a large amount of force coming, so much that it disrupts your sense of stability. And yet, there's ways to win the magical battle. And the ways to win would be first having good inner balance, but there's also magical rituals you can do to
Hmm.
dispel the attack. I'm highly ethical, so I don't want to hurt anyone.
Hmm.
However, there are there are voodoo priests and Wiccans that get in a life or death battle. It's
Hmm.
ongoing until one of them dies, and they end up dying not necessarily inside the magical battle, but in an unrelated accident most of the time. And there's kinds of occult groups, um, all over the place that kind of work on the dark side and or some of the dark side. I mean, there's people dark and light, if you will, in any
Hmm.
religion or in any spiritual teaching. And so some of the people that are more dark, they attack other people. And there's even people in a religion of Umbanda in South America, mainly Brazil, that people pay for them to magically attack someone. So there's people that are almost trained in dark magic to magically attack, and people pay for them to get magical other people to get magically attacked. And sometimes it doesn't work, and
Hmm.
sometimes it does, and the people get real sick.
Hmm. So I've had someone, uh, I don't want to say too much, but they said they're going to spend the rest of their life trying to destroy me, and they do mess with the occult and spells. So should I be worried, and what would you recommend that I do?
Well, so far in this interview, you seem like you have it together pretty well. So first, I tell you not to worry too much.
Okay.
Um, you know, um, you can certainly pray. I think praying is the best way, and you don't have to pray to any specific god or goddess. Just choose what you connect with. It can be a general god or goddess, or it can be your higher guardian angel. It can
Hmm.
be Jesus Christ. It can be the Buddha. It's whatever you connect with. And I would
Hmm.
suggest getting down on your hands and knees and basically praying every day. Lighting a candle, having an altar, lighting a candle, lighting some incense, saying, I open this altar in the name of God. I ask for protection. Then get down
Hmm.
on your hands and knees and pray and say whatever you feel like praying in that prayer. You're just talking. You can say anything. But I think the best way is praise, thanks, ask. So praise the deity first, then
Hmm.
thank the deity for your blessing, and then
Hmm.
ask for what you need.
Yeah, that's pretty much anytime I've gotten any type of gift or good luck, I've done a good deed and then I've prayed and I've been very thankful and I've asked and it's almost magic within like 12 hours. It's like, what the heck is going on? All right, so you mentioned spirit guides also in the book and interviews. So back in 2014-ish, I'm 40 now, I'd say around 2014, I didn't really know much. Yeah, I didn't really know tons about the psychic worlds and spiritual world. I ran into someone at the grocery store while buying garlic who said, "Oh, you're gonna smell like garlic." And I said, "Well, if everyone has garlic, you're not gonna smell like it." So anyway, through him, he literally like almost threw at me cards of all these local psychics, and there was a meetup group, and I just kind of went, and there are these nice girls, and I really didn't know much about, mediumship and spirit guides, spiritual realm. So anyway, very long story short, from about 2014 to about 2018-ish, I studied almost once a week with different groups, and a few of these teachers taught I'd say the main famous or well-known full-time psychics in New York. So I learned a lot. I ended up doing a mediumship reading. Apparently, I can do those. I describe someone's parents specifically. So anyway, almost all of these teachers believe that we have spirit guides, and three, I want to say, told me that I have a huge army, like, oh my God, and it follows me wherever I go, and that they want me to fulfill all these missions in life, so I can't get distracted. The main thing is I can't be distracted with a husband or a man or something. That's like what I've been told for like 15 years. So what do you think about all this spirit guide stuff?
Well, I agree with a lot of it. I agree
Hmm.
with most of what you said and most
Hmm.
of what you gathered from other people. The only thing I don't agree with is, well, getting obsessed over a man would not be good.
No.
However, having a healthy, supportive partner in a healthy relationship is good because it gives a
Hmm.
sense of grounding. But if you're
Hmm.
just obsessing and worrying about romantic possibilities, then yes, that could distract you and that could get you off track. So if you're comfortable being single, go with it.
So do you, yeah, actually, this is a conversation I've had with a lot of people in this world. So do you think that it is better for the purpose of a human to be single or to be in romantic relationships?
Well, that's something spirituality groups debate.
Mm-hmm.
And like I kind of say in my book, the main character in my book actually goes through a love affair and ends up getting married.
Mm-hmm.
And Panic Magic by Clint Sabom, you can look it up on Amazon. I'm sure you'll have a link below in the show notes. But um, basically, the main character, Troy Abraham, does have a loving relationship that serves him as beneficial. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, it's it it's six in one, half a dozen in the other. It's like my wife always says, tanto fas. Either way is fine. But yeah, it's more up to the individual. Like, what do you feel comfortable with?
And in the book, there's the attention of nefarious enemies. So this is something I've noticed a lot of like mainstream podcaster people start talking about. Specifically, I noticed December, I want to say not the one that just passed, the one before it. So about like a year and a half ago, I noticed right around December, specifically December, very weird year, many people were talking about a war of good versus evil that has like increased and sped up. Do you think there's a war of good versus evil going on right now?
I think there's been a war versus good and evil since the beginning of time.
Mm,
um, whether there's something that's increased about it, I don't know, but I do think it kind of has actually. I
mm-hmm,
would kind of agree. There is certainly nefarious enemies out there, and there's certainly plenty of people working for the good. And
mm-hmm,
obviously, I stick my actions and my own friendships to people working for the good. So I don't really know a whole lot about evil people, except that it does exist strongly in this
mm-hmm.
right now.
People say alcohol might be linked to like evil or darkness or letting in some spirits. I don't know. But on that note, we have about 3 minutes left, so I'm just going to throw it back to you. What would you like us to know? Anything you want to talk about? You got about 2, 3 minutes.
First of all, you can look up the book on Amazon, Panic Magic by
Mm-hmm,
Clint Sabom. It's called Sabom, is the way you spell my last name, and it should come up. And it's not very expensive, so buy it, and it will be a good read. It will not let you down. And, I also want to say you might learn some things just based on what the main character goes through. Now,
mm-hmm,
this book is kind of what the publishing market would call urban fantasy. So it
mm-hmm,
is fantasy, but it takes place in the real world as we know it. So it is a fiction book. This is not nonfiction, it's a fiction book. and in the category of urban fantasy.
All right. So, on that note, thank you for listening. Check out the book. Check out some of his interviews if you're interested in reincarnation, levitation, flying, being balanced, maybe balancing out fire versus water. See, I was listening. I did my research. I don't always do my research, so I got to brag about it when I do it. So, on that note, I'm gonna throw it back to Mark in the studio, and thanks for listening to It Came from the Radio.